All right, and we are live. Kate Allgood, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Allgood, that's like the greatest name in coaching ever. You were like born for this.
Yeah, greatest name for coaching, greatest name being an athlete. Good thing I was a good athlete, else that may not wouldn't have been good.
That's it. It's all good, man. Exactly.
Yeah.
Talk about positivity right there. So I'm grateful to have you come on the show. I love talking mental performance. I think as I was mentioning off air, I think it's one of those things we all talk about, but there's a lot of misconceptions about practices behind it and what it actually means. So to have you come on and speak about resilience and mental practice, specifically in athletics, is really cool. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. So now you're a hockey kid. So as much as I love talking about mindset, I love talking about hockey. So
Okay.
are, are hockey players a different type of crazy than other athletes? This episode is brought to you by Paluva. Paluva is a new zero-drop minimalist shoe with a distinctive five-toe design. Paluvas give you the most authentic barefoot style experience, but with sufficient cushioning to use for all manner of everyday movement, fitness, and athletics. I've been using these new shoes in both strength training and my daily walks, and I have to tell you, they are by far the best minimalist shoe that I've come across. The popularity of minimalist shoes have been on a big upswing, but Paluvas are a step ahead of every other zero-drop wide box shoe because of the critical feature of individual five-toe articulation, a separate slot for each of your toes. This allows for correct dynamic movement of the foot through walking or running, which is impossible when toes are encased in a single box. Now, minimalist shoes have faced controversy in recent years about causing injury from inappropriate use. So the big picture mission is start walking and living in Paluvas as often as possible. Use your specialized running shoes, basketball shoes, work boots, or high heels when you need to, but wear Paluvas as much as possible to reawaken the natural functionality of the human foot to stand, walk, run, and perform. And Paluvas also have a sleek, cool design, so you get a barefoot shoe that looks great as well as feels great. And now you can try a pair of Paluvas with no risk and realize that these are the most comfortable shoes you've ever worn. They are literally designed to feel like you're walking barefoot on a putting green. So you can go visit paluva.com and use a code SC15 for a 15% discount off your first pair. That's SC15 at checkout. Thank you very much. Let's get to the show.
In one sense, yes, but you could say the same for any athlete, right? I've worked with UFC fighters and supercross, motocross athletes, and that's a totally different breed as well, right? So
Yeah.
I think when you look at it in terms of maybe the main sports, then yeah, they're definitely maybe a different breed. But I think every athlete and every sport has their own complexities and their own
Mhm.
challenges within that sport.
Yeah, no doubt. So it was funny. I found hockey later in life. The place I worked at, we went into a place that was a hockey training studio. So I got to work with a lot of the young athletes and then actually learned how to skate in my 30s and absolutely fell in love with the sport. I'm like, I wish I was doing this growing up. I was a baseball, basketball kid, but it is a blast of a sport. And now I mean, you started from the age of 2 playing sports all the way up until the top levels there. So what was it like, growing up as a hockey kid, and like what did athletics teach you growing up?
I mean, obviously, it teaches you a lot of stuff. You hear the teamwork, the communication, hard work. I think it definitely, though, on a deeper level for me, resilience and just the importance of enjoying what you're doing. And then I think finally, just being able to be in a flow state and what that experience really looks like. And I think that's something everyone, whether you're a hockey player, an athlete, or in any, kind of avenue of life, we're kind of seeking that and searching for more moments of flow to really be immersed in what we're doing. So I
Mhm.
think that it really taught me how to do that and the experience of that. And then that's something that really helps you to not only elevate your own performance, but really enjoy the experience at the same time.
Yeah. Did the mental side of the game and like the importance of that, did you see that early on, or was it at a certain level of competition where that started to come into play a lot more than just the physical?
Yeah, I think towards the end of my career, I started to have I think it was my last year actually, where for the first time ever, I noticed some shifts in my on ice performance because of things on the mental side. And that'd really been the first time I'd ever experienced it. I'd always found a way to perform no matter what was happening in my personal life, no matter what was going on with school or anything. And so that I think really, I was already in psychology and studying psychology at the time. So I think that obviously kind of fascinated me even more. But when I reflected on my career, I really realized I had intuitively done some things quite early on in my career that were on the mental side and helping me to drive my focus, drive my energy to get to the place I needed to be able to perform. I just didn't really connect the dots at that time, but it was stuff I was doing. And for some reason, I realized, I guess, in some way, shape, or form, it was helping me. So I
Yeah.
just kept doing it.
What were some of the things looking back like that you did intuitively very well? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so for me, when I before I went and played, I'd have this kind of pre-game routine where I'd go to our TV room, and this was, back before YouTube and all this stuff. So I'd pop in the VHS and I watched anybody who's Canadian probably will know this, which is Rock'em Sock'em, which was done by Don Cherry, and it was a videotape of basically the highlights from the previous NHL season. So, the best
Oh,
hits, the
awesome.
best saves, the best passes, the best goals. And me being a forward, I just, would watch the assists and the goals.
Mhm.
And I would, though, watch it and then imagine myself, right? Do the mental rehearsal of doing that specific pass or that specific goal, and then feel the feelings of having just scored or having made a
Mhm.
beautiful pass that led to a goal. And so, as I moved on with my career, obviously I realized the importance of that mental rehearsal and generating the emotions and the feelings behind it in a positive way. And then I'd
Mhm.
be very specific with the kind of music I would listen to in the car ride. So I was very fortunate I got control of the music because that may not
Okay.
always be the case. But I would be very selective, and somehow I knew I needed to keep it, really fun and upbeat and nothing like super intense. And, it was
Mm,
more fun, upbeat or motivational. Like obviously the Rocky, theme song was played quite a
sure.
bit probably on the way to the hockey game. And then when I got there, I would just kind of go through my normal process of taping my stick, maybe talking to my teammates, maybe stick handling a little bit. I was always nervous. Nervous energy was always my experience. It could have been the first game of the season, first
Mhm.
practice of the season, championship game, and I would always chew gum. And I think it helped me to channel that energy and give me something to focus on, so that I
Mm.
didn't get consumed or focus too heavily on the nervous energy. But my self talk would be one of knowing just that the nervousness was a part of the game, it was a part of the process, and it would subside as soon as I hit the ice. And it would.
Mhm.
Every time I hit the ice, it pretty much subsided, and I was good. So I think all those various things, from self-talk to the energy to the focus, the mental rehearsal, those are all really important foundational mental skills. And I happen to just kind of do those things.
Yeah, okay. Like the music's interesting from there. It's like it's upbeat, you said, but it's not too intense from there. Like
Yes.
was there a specific genre that was kind of the go-to?
Yeah, I was kind of in the more the poppy, like a Backstreet Boy type
All right.
thing. There was, because I'm from Canada, they did this. What was it? This the equivalent to MTV, which was Much Music for us. They always, did a yearly CD of, kind of the best of from that genre,
Yeah.
poppy or dance type
The jock
music.
jams. Yeah.
Exactly, kind of like the jock jams, and I listened to the jock jams a lot as well. So that was kind of what I would listen to. I just pop that in and like repeat it or go back
Yeah.
to a song that I liked and just kind of go from there.
Yeah, it's so funny, Kate. I could remember being a young kid going to like the high school basketball games when I was like in fifth, sixth grade. And I don't remember the games, but I remember the warm up where like they would run out and they had like the jock jams going on, like, boom, let me hear you say hey. I'm like, I
Yeah.
remembered that so vividly. Like, oh my God, this energy is amazing. I have no idea what happened in the game. But I remember the prep beforehand and like you got so amped up from it. So it's kind of similar of what you're talking about. Like the right routines is probably like the most powerful thing to do for getting yourself in the right mindset.
Oh, absolutely. If you find it, and part of what I tell people when I go through it is, one, it's what you do that has to look a certain way, but then it's how you do it, right? You could have, lay it out and be, okay, I'm going to do A, B, C, D, but depending on how you do it, the energy you carry through it, how present you are while you're going through it versus maybe just kind of going through the motions of going through it, that obviously also is really, really important.
Yeah. So, how did you find yourself in the world of coaching, and what made you want to look at the mental side of coaching rather than maybe getting into something like the physical side of coaching?
No, it's a good question. I actually, when I first graduated from undergrad, I did get into the physical side. I did biomechanics training with athletes and helping them deal with injuries and everything. I think it started with my undergrad in psychology, and that, sparked an interest in me in the mind and understanding that place. When I came out of undergrad, I was kind of done with formal education, and I knew I just wanted to kind of get into the world. And I'd found a modality that I had luckily kind of stumbled upon towards the end of my career when I was dealing with injuries that had really helped me. So I had a little bit of a passion for, getting certified in that and starting to work with
Mhm.
athletes more on the physical side. And so I started doing that, and it's still in one sense kind of a passion of mine. I still love that area, but I think I started to realize that there was constantly this pull back to understanding the mind and working with athletes. And back when I, started, back in the late 2000s, mental training wasn't very prevalent. It's not like it is
Mhm.
today. So I realized, well, we have all these people who do physical training with athletes. You've got, you can name all the modalities that exist,
Yeah.
and personal trainers and strength coaches. And I realized that was a little bit of a gap. And it just seemed to be something I was a little bit more interested in. And also just for me thinking longevity of career, probably a little bit better to be talking with somebody versus, pushing and having to use
Mhm.
my own body to work with somebody. And so I just, about 3 years after I graduated, I kind of got the itch. And I actually initially went to Oriental medicine school, so for acupuncture,
Okay.
because I thought, acupuncture is very much kind of connecting the mind and the body. And so that kind of resonated with me. But I think it just always kept coming back to sports psychology and training the mind. And so I eventually found a program and did that.
Yeah. When was it that you saw it started to shift into getting a little bit more understood that the mental side of training and practices are just as vital and we need to work on this as much as the physical side? Because I feel like I saw it a little bit later in my career in life. Everything was about the physical side and the discipline kind of just head down, like, just, the Nike just do it versus actually looking at different practices specifically for mindset from there. When did you start in your experience and your studies start to see, all right, this is starting to hockey stick a little bit more into, people are reaching or seeking this out more?
5 to 8 years, maybe. I think it was a slow increase. There was no one moment where I went, wow, like, but I think
Mhm.
it was just a slow build. And I think social media has kind of helped, I guess, with that a little bit because now you start to see more and more people doing it. Back when I started, there wasn't really social media from that standpoint. Like there was Facebook, but other than that, so you didn't even really know who else was doing it or what was going on. So I think really it's boomed a lot over the last little bit. I think more athletes are talking about it,
Mhm.
especially around probably the, closing in on the pandemic, and around the pandemic there was a lot of
Mhm.
conversation. So I think that obviously amplified just the spotlight on it. I think there's still a huge gap and still a huge room to improve because I think a lot of times, and I was talking about this with somebody the other day, where people understand that training your mind is really, really important, but actually doing it is a totally different thing.
Yes,
So,
yes.
so there's a huge understanding and awareness that it's important right now, but that next step is still, I think, very much missing. But yeah, the last 5 to 7 years, I think just the awareness of it has grown
Mhm.
considerably. Just, I think, again, because of athletes talking about it, social media, and just the ability to have, so much information kind of getting sent out there all the time.
Yeah, it seems like it really wasn't that long ago that any talk about mindset or mental performance was like, if you have an issue with that, well, then you go to therapy. And it wasn't something that was talked about. You kind of did that behind the scenes. And when you're done, come back to the team and then you're ready to go. And then I remember, I think the first athlete I remember kind of stepping back and being like, what's this about was Michael Phelps, after he won all the Olympic medals and then was like kind of in a depression and really not motivated and didn't know if he was going to come back. And it was almost a weird thing in my naive head of like, well, like you're a top athlete. Like, how are you not coming back and stuff? And then some other ones started to come out and and speak more openly about it, as you said. But it's curious what you said there about like where it's talked about a lot, but it's not really like, what do you do then? Like, what practices like that you do from there? Like, how do you actually apply this? So, like, what are with the athletes that are coming to you, what are the struggles or the questions that they're coming to you with the most often, like the longest levers, where they're really struggling with their mental performance and not sure what to do in this sector?
Yeah, number one would be confidence. I think across the board, youth athlete, professional athlete, confidence is usually hand in hand if they're not performing the way that they want to.
Mm.
And then, bridging that gap. All people come in and be like, I'm performing great in practice. It's going away in competition. Like it's not happening.
Mm.
The translation is missing. Like I know the skill's there. It's
Yeah.
not being displayed when I need it to be displayed. So that would be another one. But I think, again, confidence underlies that, where if you're not confident in yourself and your confidence is not being driven from an internal source, your confidence is going to be very up and down. And with that, your performance will be up and down. So, how do you drive that performance from within you? I think that's
Mhm.
the biggest concern most people are coming to see me for is confidence or inconsistency with their performance.
Yeah. What is, I mean, it's kind of like an open-ended question, but like, what is self-confidence then? Like when people come in and be like, I'm not confident, and then you start to unravel it a little bit more. What's kind of that conversation often like? Is it just putting too much pressure on themselves, like to perform in a certain spot, or is it kind of something maybe different?
No, it definitely could come from that. It could be like, what are their expectations? Do they have high expectations on themselves? And therefore, they, you know, not only very demanding, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Being very demanding may not cause an issue with, low confidence, but do they put too much pressure on themselves? And does that kind of start a trickle down effect into their self talk? And then their self talk is being extremely hard on themselves. So when we look at confidence, first and foremost, how you talk to yourself
Mhm.
is going to influence, do you have a decent foundation to start with, or are you just, kind of ripping yourself down every time you do something good or every time you do something bad? You just kind of take away everything that you just did good in one instance. So I think the dialogue and the inner dialogue in your self-talk is absolutely number one that we always are going to have a conversation around,
Yeah.
because it is, whether it's comparison or putting so much pressure on yourself or always looking at the negatives, wherever it's coming from. Again, it's the self-talk is always going to be the biggest thing that's now going to influence how you
Yeah.
how you feel and how you deal with it.
Yeah. It's such a tough one too. I've seen like it's almost it doesn't matter the background that you have or where you come from. Like that negative self-talk is such a challenging one for everybody. Like you could have it seems like there's I've seen people have the best support in the world versus people who have had the toughest of challenges and upbringings. And nobody's fully immune to this wealth of like getting into that negative self-talk from there. Have you seen that?
Oh, absolutely. I think you could have the best support. You could grow up in a very, in one sense, comfortable environment, get everything you ever could need and want to help you perform. And you could be, trying to figure it out, not really having the support. And you're right, you're not immune either which way you look at it to that negative self-talk. And so it's a skill set, and people just aren't taught how to talk to themselves, right? We're
Yeah.
kind of conditioning ourselves as we go along, mostly unconsciously, to talk to ourselves in a certain way that does not help us perform.
Yeah. So, what are some of the practices and the best skills that you found to help somebody start with improving their self-talk and really kind of getting into confidence to not only have it internally, but then see it really perform on the field?
Yeah, there's a couple. I think, and this is a longer term, I guess, the meat part of the meteor part of how you do this, which is you have to detach from your self-talk first and foremost, and to see that
Mm,
it's just a thought, not you, and to observe it. And from that space, then the power really comes into how seriously do you take that thought. It is just a thought. So if you take it really seriously and you agree with it and you think that's absolutely correct and that's exactly how things are going to go, that's what you're going to end up, thinking about, versus if
yeah.
you sit there and go like, well, that's an interesting, thought, but I'm going to choose not to believe that or not to pay attention to that anymore. I'm going to
Mm,
choose to create a new dialogue or focus on something that's now going to actually benefit me and help me. Is
mm,
completely different, but you have to detach from it. And most people don't. They just kind of are those thoughts in their mind. They're not seeing that they are separate from it, right? The fact that we know you are separate from it is because you can observe your own thought. If you can't
Mhm.
observe it, then you wouldn't be separate from it, but there's a part of you that's
Right.
observing it, else you wouldn't see it or hear it in your own mind.
Right.
Right. So that's first and foremost.
Yeah.
And then from there, I teach them, about what I call neutral self-talk and obviously more compassionate self-talk. So a lot of people talk about positive self-talk. And I think for a lot of athletes I've worked with, even though they have attempted it, they've heard it, it doesn't really resonate with them because it can feel false and kind of like they're just, saying like, that's okay. Like I'll get the next one, something like that. Or like, it's all
Right.
going to be okay. They don't really believe that because you don't know if you're going to get the next one and you don't like it's all future oriented, right? Usually when we
Right.
do the positive self-talk, but you don't know what the future holds. Where neutral is very present moment action oriented, saying, okay, in this moment, here's the situation as it is. This is the situation, very point blank, without trying to like,
Mhm.
I guess, shadow it any which way of good or bad. It just this is the situation. Based off of that, what's the next action step I have to take? What's the thing I need to focus on to do what I need to do? So it's
Yeah.
very matter of fact, and it's very much just focus on what you can control and what you can do in this moment based off of the situation you find yourself in.
Wow, that's really interesting. I've never heard it phrased that way, like the neutral self-talk. And it makes so much sense because this is I've this is where I've had a problem with affirmations for so long of like, just the spouting out, just like the I'm the best or I'm strong. And it's like, well, if you don't feel strong or there's no reference on that, you're kind of just speaking false. Your brain knows that you're talking bullshit. So it's
Hmm.
like it's so easy to just like go back into the other phrase. So I remember Meg Henry, uh, talked about that when she came on the podcast about like if you are like finding a reference point of when you're strong and actually recognizing that as something kind of more powerful. So these shifts of like not just be positive and positive self-talk. And I think that's where some people almost just look down on like, oh, the mindset practice because it's very just surface level, like just positive patty type stuff. It's like, no, like it's not just shifting a negative into a positive. There's a middle ground in there. And as you just said, like the neutral talk, just seeing it for what it is first, it probably takes the emotion out of it so you can actually see it for really what it is.
Well, exactly, right. And that's the whole point is to take the emotion out of it. So you do see it for what it is and you see what you can do within that
Mhm.
context, right? And because most of the time our emotions are going to blow something out of proportion
Yeah.
and then we're going to like future trip, right? We're going to go way into the future of how we think this moment is going to impact the rest of that,
Yeah.
let's say a golfer, the rest of that round, I get that all the time with golfers. They have one bad shot and then they're like projecting, the entire next like 9 holes and how this is
Right.
what I'm going to have to do, or this is how bad is now I've lost my score and all these things. And it's like, okay, let's just focus on now where's your ball from that standpoint. What do you have to do to now get your ball back to where you're trying to get it
Yeah.
to, right?
Yeah.
And to
It's a
focus
cheat.
just
It's
on
a
that.
cheat code. It's a cheat code to get into the present, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a bit of a cheat code because ultimately you're correct. All we're trying to do is get someone to be present. And
Mhm.
if you eventually what you're wanting to do, and I tell my clients this is that you really don't have much thought process, right? If you really are present, if you are in a flow state, if you're super immersed in what you're doing, you're not going to have many thoughts. So you're not going to have to shift your thoughts too much, right? But obviously during that time period where you are still having to deal with a lot of thoughts coming up, it's a great way to help get you back into the present moment, kind of be in that moment and focus on what you can control.
Yeah. When they come to you, like, is it normally they're speaking directly out, like, I'm having trouble with confidence, or is it more kind of hearing how people speak and you kind of can start recognizing it more from there? Like, do usually your athletes come in knowing like what the issue that they're dealing with is, or is it more kind of like, help me, Kate, I have no idea what's going on?
I mean, yeah, there's definitely sometimes where people like have no clue what's going on, but for the most part, on a surface level, they can pinpoint whether it's they lack confidence, lack consistency, lack a good, maybe the mindset that they're going to need to compete. So they kind of probably have at least that umbrella idea of what's going on. Underneath it, then, if you go back to confidence or the mindset, they don't know then what they actually need to do
Hmm.
to build that confidence or to figure out the mindset that they need. That's obviously what I'm there to help them with, but they can kind of identify, as I said, that umbrella, I guess, definition or term,
Yeah.
but what they actually have to do, or maybe what really is the thing that's impacting their lack of confidence, that part they may not 100% know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And you mentioned before that detachment. I think that's such a huge point because how often we go in and say, I am bad at this situation, and we identify with it, right? And it's like when you actually think, no, you're not that. Like, no, you have a tendency maybe to do that, but that detachment of it, when you get that, is so powerful. How do you, what's the, are some good practices to work on that? Are you a proponent of like journaling it out? Is it more of like a meditation practice? Like, are there other ones that like you help with athletes to now practice this and work this into their daily routine?
You named probably the top two that
Mhm.
I work with. So yeah, meditation's a big one, and that's a huge one that I get all of my clients to start to do because it's the analogy I use, it's like going to the gym and doing push-ups, right? But this is very specific to training your attention, and from there, you're then training your ability to detach.
Mhm.
And so you have to spend that time. And then journaling is also another great one. I've definitely had a lot of clients that will say that as they're writing things out, it helps them to see things in a new way, a new perspective, and to be like, oh, okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was, or oh,
Yeah.
like, okay, so now I got a new perspective, and that helps them to detach, right? So either one of those are two great places to start.
Yeah. Do you find is do some people have a challenge with the journaling aspect of it? Like it's really challenging for them to write, or does it seem like it's a pretty, common one that everybody works with?
Well, for me, knowing my demographic, I made it a little bit easier. I've created specific questions that they then answer
Uh-huh.
to as kind of more of that journal. There is area for, I guess, free form journaling, kind of more of the
Mhm.
traditional sense where people are just writing out their thoughts. And I leave that kind of open ended for people because you're right. Some people love that and the ability to kind of just write whatever's coming to their mind or write about their day or whatever it might be, whereas other people it's a little bit more of a challenge. But I find even as they're just going through and answering the questions and writing that out, that is also helping them to detach, but it's helping us to also make sure that they're reflecting in the way that I want them to learn how to reflect, to be able to see the things they do well, which is also goes into confidence, seeing what you've
Mhm.
done well, see, any situation where you might have deemed that a mistake or something you didn't do well and shift that to a learning opportunity and to reframe that. So
Uh-huh.
obviously I'm using the journaling as a way to subtly also develop some of these other skills while also journaling and being able to create that detachment at the same time.
Yeah. What kind of questions do you usually prompt at the beginning for people?
Yeah, so for them, if it's right after a competition or a practice, they're being prompted to look at three areas that they did well, but to be very specific and very clear about that, not just say I scored 3 goals. To say, well, what did you do that was in your control that led to you, scoring 3 goals, maybe in that
Mm.
instance, right? And that could have been something maybe physical. I really moved my feet today, really got to the open spaces. If it's more, obviously, a lot of the time we're trying to focus more on the mental side. If it was, I felt really confident today. Like I started the game, in a really good place and be like, okay, well, what did you do to start the game in a really good place? What gave you that confidence, right?
Mhm.
So really break it down as much as we possibly can to pinpoint the exact thing that they have control over that can be then duplicated. So they start to understand what are those things they need to do before their games or before
Mhm.
their practices to set themselves up. And then the
Mm.
next thing is looking at what did I learn. So again, reframing any mistakes. But even the nice thing is a lot of my clients will then look at the things they did well and see what they learned from that thing, being like, oh, I learned today that if I take 5 minutes to do some breathing before my game, like it really helps to calm me down, which is a great thing.
Yeah.
I'm losing my voice here.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah. Um, I like that. I like it's so interesting that it just go one layer deeper into just remembering it can be so powerful. As you said, like, yeah, maybe you did score 3 goals, awesome, but how did that happen? Like, actually break down, great, bravo, but break it down into actually what happened during that spots, because more often you can replicate those things and build them into those different routines from there. So, yeah, journaling's always been an interesting conversation because I've done like the stream of consciousness and I've had people work with that. And some people do very well with that. But sometimes if you're in a bad state or like already a bad state, like your stream of consciousness is not a really cool place to live. So getting actually some affirmative questions just to kind of prompt you in there, I found actually get you into a little bit more of that free nature, feeling from there. So I like that you do really the combination with both. So is there certain I'm curious about different types of athletes and different sports and the work and mindset that maybe they need. Do you see there's a difference at all in what type of mental performance or work that some sports or athletes need versus other ones? Like the difference between UFC fighters, which, it's a very intense, very, you're in the cage right there, versus something like golf, which is competitive, but it's a much different type arena. Is there any difference at all there based on kind of mindset practice?
No, not in terms of mindset practice. Obviously, how you apply it, where they need to be. Obviously, a UFC fighter would need to be much more, amped up or aroused usually than a golfer would need to be when they're out there on the golf course. But when you break it down, it's the same. It's the same when I've worked with individuals in the military, right? The actual skills don't change. Obviously, the context in which you're applying it does, and how you maybe are able to apply it
Mhm.
does, or where you need to get. Because again, part of it is understanding what's your kind of ideal competitive mindset. So all these tools, it's how do we get you there? So that obviously shifts for not just sports, but for people, right? So
Mhm.
I've had hockey players who need very different competitive mindsets if they're a goalie versus a forward versus defense. So how they use it to still play the game of hockey is going to be slightly different, even though the skill sets are in one sense kind of the same.
Yeah. So with this time now too, I mean, you've been in this practice from, a bit before the big boom of social media and stuff to now it's one of the topics that's talked about forever about how many people are, locked in and what that's doing into self-confidence and self-worth and comparison and stuff. Did you see a big shift in your career from when you started versus how athletes are, coming into practicing mindset and kind of like where their mental capacity is now versus, what it was when you first started?
So kind of like the impact of social media, is that,
Yeah,
yeah, kind of what you're asking?
that's my long-winded way of asking that. Yes.
Um, it's a good question. I think there's definitely, in some sense, an uptick, or where it's a new reason for maybe low self-confidence or comparing. I think athletes have always compared,
Yeah.
and I talk to athletes now who, they'll talk to me about comparing, but it has nothing to do with social media. It's about they're comparing to the other person who plays their same position, like maybe they're third string and they're comparing to the first string or the second string. They're worrying a lot about the coach and what does the coach think. And it really isn't centered around social media. But I think at the same time, I've then had athletes where really all of their comparison comes from social media. And this is even
Mhm.
professional athletes where they're looking at, some player over here who they know and they know they're better than that player, but that player now has got pulled up to the, top league and they're still here in the minor leagues and you're just kind of getting twirled around. So I think it just opened a new way for people to compare. And some people obviously are going to get sucked into that direction. And for other people, they're going to get sucked into the way to compare as
Mhm.
it always has existed. I think the one thing with social media is it just allows you to see so many more athletes and maybe compare to so many more athletes.
Yeah.
Whereas, even when I was growing up or when I first started doing this, right, you're only really seeing your teammates, the people you're comparing yourself to, in terms of the other team and maybe the other teams that you start to play. So it's a pretty small circle. You're not seeing what somebody halfway across the world was doing,
Oh yeah.
whereas now you do. So I think
Yeah.
that's where it's really maybe had the most influence is that there's just so many more opportunities to now see that, like, oh my goodness, look at this kid over there who's like 2 years younger than me and he's already doing, this skill that I still
Yeah.
haven't, done, even though maybe that's the only skill he can do and he can't actually apply it in the middle of a game, but it looks
Exactly.
great on
Yeah.
Instagram.
Exactly. It's
So,
yeah, behind with music behind it and slow
yeah.
motion. I mean, it looks freaking awesome, right? It's like it is. I can see how challenging it is. And it's funny too, as you mentioned, like, nobody's immune to it, even the professional athletes who, have just as many, issues with this as somebody who's coming up from an amateur level or just a general person there. Often we put these people on a pedestal of thinking because they have these great skill sets that they've got everything that's so down in play. Um, but yeah, it's funny. I remember like we had a kid from our area growing up who went to Syracuse when they won the national championship in basketball. And we knew there was a 7 foot guy around here, but you never like saw him until you actually like played that team. It's like you just heard this myth behind. Now, yeah, as you said, kids might be seeing all these people from all over the place. And what is there like with that? Is it something like, do you think just a detox from social media for them is best, or which is probably a really challenging thing specifically for kids because it's such a part of their life? How do you approach that when it is something like that with social media and that comparison? Is it like detox time or is it more kind of just working around it?
It depends. It depends on what's the options for that individual. So, I have had conversations with some athletes, and it is detox time. It's like you can get off social media, they get off social media.
Mhm.
And every time I hear somebody gets off social media, they're like, "Oh, best decision." They always say that. As
Right?
soon as they get off social media, they're like, "Best decision. It's been so great." And some of them have navigated back to it, and then they realize like, "Oh, okay, like I got to navigate away from it again." Like, good decision. But at the same time, I do understand that there is a place for social media, and sometimes it has to be like I have even high school pro athletes, like they need to do social media, whether it's, kind of again for promoting themselves, it's kind of
Right.
part of the marketing.
Mhm.
I think for younger athletes, it may be even part of the recruiting process, right? Almost like creating your highlight reel on social media now versus like sending in the CD. That used to probably be the thing where you sent in your highlight reel CD. Now it's like, here's my Instagram handle and here's my
Clip
highlight
them all
reel.
on the beat. Oh wow, this is so funny going back to the old
Right.
days. Yeah.
Um, so then it's saying, okay, how do you create a relationship that works for you with Instagram? And can it be one, do you turn off the notifications so you're not getting binged every time somebody posts something? So you go then look, which is also just good for your attention and stuff to stop getting pinged with everything that's coming through your phone.
Mhm.
So to make it more purposeful that you're going into the app for a reason, maybe set limitations. And also before you enter into the app or log out, so you have to actually log in, which can sometimes just give you enough of a barrier to think about, do I want to go into Instagram right now?
Mhm.
Because it's such a automatic thing. Like I'll do it too. Like I'm just sitting there all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, Instagram. Like, why did I come to Instagram right now?
It's a compulsion rather
It's
than
a
an addiction,
compulsion.
right? Yeah.
Exactly. And then what's the point? What's the purpose? All apps, in one sense, can be beneficial if they have a good purpose behind what you're doing. If you're going in there, post a highlight reel because this is where the scouts are going to come and look to
Mhm.
see if they want to recruit you, great. Go in, do your post, get out. Right. So have a purpose because it's no different than any other app. If you go to Maps, it's a great app. Plug in your destination, get directed to your destination. We obviously all used to be
Mhm.
able to do it without that, but now we all think it's fantastic and what would we do without it? But it's
Yeah.
very purposeful. And so you just have to think about what's the purpose of me using this app and is it benefiting me or is it not benefiting me? And if it's not benefiting you, then figure out how you either get rid of it or create a new relationship with it.
Right. Yeah. So, a couple words that I've seen you use a lot in your work are focus, which I love the topic of focus, but also energy management. I think we talk a lot about time management and stuff, but energy management is a really interesting term on there. So, what do you mean when you say like energy management and using that into practice?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we all talk about time management. We can't manage time. 60 minutes goes by. It's
No
60
matter
minutes.
what.
Can't
Yeah.
no matter what. Energy management is how do you use your energy, your focus, your behavior, everything that you're doing is within you has a source of energy associated with it. So, let's say you have 60 minutes to do something, that 60 minutes is going to go by. So you can't manage that part of the equation, but you can manage how efficient or effective you are based off of how well are you focusing? Are you avoiding distractions? Are you not getting caught up in your own head? So if you start worrying about something in the future, you're wasting energy because that is to think about it and to continue to think about it, that is using energy within you, but you're
Mhm.
not going anywhere. You're not using it. It's not benefiting you. It's not doing anything for you. And that energy is now being taken away from something else you could have used that energy for, whether it was focus or being able to manage your self talk in a critical moment, whatever it might be. Your energy is finite. So you get to pick and choose where you spend it.
Yeah.
And hopefully you spend it in a place that is advantageous for you and being efficient with your energy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, being from the fitness world and the training world for so long, I've said that the person who coined the phrase practice makes perfect, he just missed one word in there. It's focused practice makes perfect because you can just go through the motions so much, but you can feel the difference when you're really focused in on something versus not, how powerful that is of not just conserving energy, but already really being effective in that time. So when someone comes to you, an athlete, and says that they are maybe having trouble focusing in the moment, what are some of the practice that you do specifically to help people with getting focused?
It's quite a number. So you have to figure out why is somebody not focusing in the way that you want them to. And for athletics, as it is for most things, to perform, you have to focus on the right thing at the right moment. And to be able to adapt how you're focusing based off of the demand of the situation and how it starts to shift. And so everyone's different. For some people, they're going to get very much in their head and get very analytical or start overthinking everything, right? So how you maybe approach them would be slightly different than somebody who gets like pigeonholed, like blinders on, gets so hyper focused, they lose all awareness, versus somebody who maybe gets too aware and, aren't able to get super focused in a moment to execute what they need to. So you have to figure out what is maybe inhibiting them from focusing in the right way in that moment and then kind of guide them. But things like meditation, your pre-performance routine, if it is designed correctly, should help you get yourself to the right place because it's going to help you get your arousal state to the right place, which also influences your focus. If you're doing it right, it should help you be more present in the moment, which again is a huge part of when
Mhm.
you're stepping out there. You got to be in the moment, present, and that's where your focus needs to be. Um, so you just have to understand what it is. Is it distractibility? Like, is someone getting really distracted and that's why they're not focusing appropriately? So you can start to fine tune it that way. But in general, you're looking at that pre performance routine from an
Mhm.
immediate standpoint. And then things like meditation over time is also going to help with that focus.
Yeah. Those pre-routines is so interesting. Do you think that is there some better routines that you help people kind of work with of getting ready for like a game or like a performance, or is it very like individualized, like everybody is going to find like their own routine that works, best for them?
No, it is pretty individualized. I have had
Yeah.
some very interesting, and I don't remember exactly what they were. I just know they were interesting routines that people have figured out that works for them. And I'm like, great, if that works for you, fantastic, right? You just have to know where do you need to be? What is that ideal competitive mindset? What does that look like for you? And then work your way backwards and say, okay, if that's where you need to end up as you're stepping out there to compete, what are the things that are available to you that will help you to get there? And,
Mhm.
what does that look like? What does the process look like? What's the timing kind of look like? And then obviously there has to be a level of flexibility because timing may not always be what the timing is ideally is for you. So how do you create a
Right.
shortened version of it? I've had people who are super structured with their routine and other people where it's very open ended and free
Yeah.
flowing and it all works for each of them.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I heard a line that I loved. It said, have routines, but don't rely on routines because they can shift and change. And because if you think that you have to do things in a specific way, but it's not helping you get to where you need to be, you no longer have a routine, you have a superstition. And it's like, it's a kind of a similar practice of like, the goal is to get yourself in the right frame for doing the thing, not to do the greatest routine possible. It's just a means to an end of getting there. So having that little bit more flexibility seems like it's really the right approach.
No, exactly. As you said, like there is a difference between a routine and a superstition, and you want
Mhm.
to reassess your routine every so often, not all the time. You don't want to be jumping around. That's another mistake I do see some people do. They're like, well, this game it was bad, so now I'm going to change next game what I do. Right? You
Right.
don't want to necessarily do that. But, I don't know, every, twice a year, once a year, right? Still think about what's my ideal competitive mindset. Everything I'm doing, is that getting me there? Do I need to shift? Because you as a person are shifting. So how you need to get yourself ready is gonna shift. So it's always about are you getting there, not just what are you doing.
Yeah. So, Kate Allgood. Kate, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time. I love hearing just the work that you're doing and the insights that you have. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So if people want to check out more of the work that you do, look at Quantum Performance, what's the best place that we can direct them?
Yeah, the website's probably the best, qpathlete.com. If you're looking more for social media, my Instagram handle is the same, qpathlete. And then YouTube would be Quantum Performance.
Perfect. Awesome. Kate, thank you so much. Listeners, thank you. I'll catch you guys in the next one. All right. Peace.